So this is a review for Wacky Wildlife, released in 1940. It's the 306th in the series, and it's directed by Tex Avery. A restoration is out there, although it seems to be on and off streaming, and hopefully one day this will make its way onto physical media. It is under copyright. You will not find this on YouTube unless Warner Brothers themselves choose to upload it. But in case you haven't seen this one, it's another spot gag short. This time around, it involves animals out in the wild doing weird and wacky things as per the title, so there's not really much there. In fact, these spot gag shorts typically don't have a story at all. Once the premise is all set up, you pretty much know what you're in for. In terms of trivia, there actually really isn't much to say. This is Avery's third spot gag short in a row after doing A Wild Hare. Maybe he was a bit run down and needed to do some quick shorts in order to catch up and get a breather or whatever. I don't know. But also these things are usually within different production orders anyway, so it's possible he had one of these in the work beforehand, but it was finished afterwards or whatever. But regardless, there's a bit of trivia for you. And thankfully though, despite the fact that the restoration uses the Blue Ribbon reissue, which is rather unfortunate, the original titles do exist, and that comes from Tex Avery's personal collection. I'm not sure where exactly that is. It'd be good if that was able to be restored and perhaps reconstructed like they were able to do with some of the other Tex Avery shorts. But at least we know what it roughly looks like, even though at the time of this recording it looks like it's in terrible condition. It is what it is. The main thing though is what's actually contained within the short itself. I do want to note one thing about the restoration though. It seems like this must have been sourced from lesser materials because it's not quite as sharp or as clear as some of the other Tex Avery restorations that's been featured on this channel in terms of reviews, and that's been released on physical media and so on. So my guess is that they did the best they could with the materials they have, but I wouldn't mind seeing Warner Archive take another stab at this one and just maybe, first of all, see if they can get that original title, but if not, at least maybe take another pass on this short and try and make it look a little bit better. Regardless, it's still way better than what we were all used to, which is those Laserdisc transfers that you would see pop up before all those HBO Max transfers showed up. But what we're going to do now is look at each and every gag. I'll give you my reaction to them, give you any trivia related within, and again, in case this is your first review, I'm going to do my best to ensure that, despite the fact that I've seen all the spot gag shorts and I know what to expect of these spot gag shorts, I have to also be fair and not just dismiss a gag just because I could see the punchline coming a mile away. So that's definitely been the challenge here. But the good thing about this Blue Ribbon reissue as we start up is that we do get that initial bit of audio that's over the Blue Ribbon title, so at the very least, that's not lost. So I know in a few cases, I can't think of any offhand, but there's been audio cut out that would start off a gag or start off a short, so it's good that at least it's here. But we do hear that unnarrated this time round, Rob C. Bruce is back, so must have been available this time after being absent from holiday highlights.
Wacky Wildlife. From far and wide, we bring to you odd and interesting action studies of our familiar friends from the animal kingdom.
Of course, you've got Mel Blanc doing all the other male voices. We have Margaret Hill doing the voice of the baby bird. And this information comes from Keith Scott's wonderful Cartoon Voices book. So as we open up, again, the restoration is not as sharp as I perhaps am used to or anything, but there's still no denying that I love whenever Tex Avery tries to ape Disney. Now, this came out in the 1940s, so you might initially think in this scene, oh, they're just aping Bambi. No, Bambi came out after this. This is just Tex Avery aping the quote-unquote Disney style, which would contain a lot of these very lush and beautiful watercolor-style backgrounds. In fact, even if you watch some of the Mickey Mouse shorts that were done in the late 1930s, you could see that they did those beautiful lush backgrounds, even though it's just, you know, a Mickey Mouse short, right? Now we see this fawn, and I'd love Robert C. Bruce's narration here, walking up daintily and is going to drink some water. You know there's going to be some sort of extreme coming, but thankfully I like the payoff here where it just slurps the water in an undaintily type fashion.
Daintily, she lowers her head and sips quietly.
The animation itself, look, it's not going to compare to what Disney were doing at the time because they were going more for realism, but it gets the job done. And it's cartoony when it needs to be, when the fawn is actually drinking the water. And for good measure, we get a wonderful Hiccup at the very end. I would imagine Avery would not get away with something like a burp at the time, but a hiccup will do.
Excuse me.
And you gotta love when Mel Blanc does a woman's voice, which he does here, saying excuse me, but it's a decent one to start off with. And I'd imagine if this is someone's first spot gag short, they'd get a kick out of it. So in the next gag, we see a bird just going about its business and a snake going about its business in trying to hunt prey. You'll notice a theme in a lot of the gags in this short where it starts off fairly realistic and then it's cartoony when it needs to be. So we see that the snake's approaching, and once again, if you're familiar with these shorts, you know some sort of extreme will happen with one of the characters. So the snake slithers up in a rather realistic fashion, but then we get the whole hypnotic thing happening.
This little bird.
Now, in a line which I'm not sure if it comes from the radio or movies at the time, so if you have an idea of where this line might have come from, let me know, because I did look around to see if anyone noticed the reference, but in any case, you know that something unexpected will happen. You hear some rather rusty hinges as the snake's jaw opens, the bird marches hypnotically towards the mouth, but then says, if you think I'm going in there, you're crazy.
If you think I'm going in there, you're crazy.
That must have been from something, because Avery usually wouldn't use something unless it's a reference or something that's perhaps close to whatever was in the pop culture at the time. But I love the look of the snake's face when he realizes, looks like this prey is just not going in my mouth. Kind of weird. Next up, we see a skunk. So this might be Pepe's distant relative, I don't know, but it's a decent gag. It's walking by, and I guess even the shadow thinks that the skunk stinks. So a nice little quickie gag. I'm sure the audiences would have gotten a kick out of it at the time. Next one I like. This one's definitely one of my favorite gags in this short because of just how subdued it actually is. It's so silly I can't help but laugh. You see a bobcat and you see a tomcat. Tomcat walks by and they just say to each other, hello Bob, hello Tom, and that's it.
There are many species of the cat family. Here's a bobcat. And here comes a tomcat.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Bob.
You'd think there might be something more to it, but no, it's just something really silly. I really love that one. So the next gag, we'll see a crane, and it's a rather silly joke, and how the crane can just stand on one leg, and, well, the toes of one of its legs become little legs as well. It's very creative, and I like the way it's animated. And fun fact, Avery would actually reuse this gag in Slap Happy Lion in a different way. Hey, if a gag works, why not reuse it? They did it all the time in cartoon studios, and in this case, Avery had one extra advantage. He was able to reuse the gag at another studio. So there's that. Now, the next gag, it takes a whopping minute to do, and it's so ridiculous. They uses this type of comedy where something might be funny initially, but then not be funny, but then it goes on for so long that it becomes funny again, and that's what happens here. And boy, oh boy, the animation's a treat here, and along with the actual music, which Carl Stalling does to the actual tiptoeing of this pack rat. So he steals one thing, has to replace it with another, goes back and forward, and so on. So Avery is definitely testing the audience's patience here, but we get that wonderful payoff that it's all just monotonous.
Monotonous, isn't it?
Thankfully, I think it's funny. Some may not, but I like the fact that even in these okay spot gag shorts, you can still see Avery experimenting a little. Next up, we see a whole bunch of alligators looking semi-realistic, and we see that one is about to leave the water, but it's got a very small body, and it says, well, I've been sick.
Is this huge specimen. Say, what in the world happened to you?
Well, I've been sick.
Now, that's not the only time that Avery would use that type of gag. He would actually reuse this same type of gag involving alligators over again, Slap Happy Lion, so he uses two gags from here over there, and again, he does it in a different way at the very least. But the interesting thing about that line is, a lot of animation researchers firmly believe that that must come from a radio reference or something along those lines, but as of this recording, no one really knows. So it'll be interesting if they can find some obscure recording that Avery must have heard and thought it was funny enough to put in his shorts, and the irony is that it's now Avery's version of that line, regardless of which short it's in, is the one that now people remember versus wherever it originated from. Regardless, it's a nice little gag, and I like, again, you can hear the xylophones play as this alligator with the giant head and small body is leaving the water. Now, the next gag, again, is Tex Avery playing with timing, where he has this bird, and again, it starts off realistic, where the bird is just going on and on with the bird whistling. And by the way, Keith Scott has a question mark as to who would have done that whistling at the time. So sometimes studios would hire people who were specialists at certain sound effects, so whether it's animal noises or in some cases like whistling in this case. So this goes on for a very long time, where this mother bird is just whistling and scolding the baby bird for reasons unknown, nor do we need to know. And then out of the blue, the bird is just like, okay, just can the bird talk, and that's it.
Oh, lay off the bird talk, Ma. What's on your mind?
And even spits, which Avery was perhaps lucky to get away with, because sometimes spitting would be a big no-no for the Hays Code and usually would be censored. But it's there. Is it funny? Well, I don't know. I think it's fine. The next one, though, is pure Avery. Now, you see a whole bunch of sheep, and in a great way to, I suppose, keep costs down, maybe to appease his boss, Avery wisely just has 3 sheep in the front animated, while the background shows all those sheeps that are there to help supply the lamb industry, I guess. But Robert C. Bruce says there's nothing like a good leg of lamb, and what do you think the lamb does?
The great sheep ranges of Montana supply the tables of the nation with lamb. Ah, there's nothing like a good leg of lamb.
Of course, the sheep lifts up its leg and acts all seductive for a few moments, and we even hear "it had to be you," because what else are you going to hear in such a shot? So this is one of the better ones, even if the joke is pretty obvious. But I love the animation of the lamb just showing off its leg like that. Again, I've seen that gag so many times, but hey, it's still funny. The next bit, we see a pig just rolling around in mud or in its own filth. Well, pigs will be pigs, right? So I like Robert C. Bruce just describing how dirty this pig is, and the pig just replies, "All right, I ain't neat."
Farm is the pig. My goodness. Isn't he a dirty, muddy, sloppy mess?
All right, so I ain't neat.
And it's interesting that Mel Blanc is voicing a pig that's not Porky in this scene either, so there's that, I guess. As for how good the gag is, it does the job. It's fine. And of course, we've got to hear Old MacDonald in the background, because what else are we going to hear in a scene like that? Now we're in a scene involving some duck hunting, which I believe Tex Avery would partake in when he's off duty at the studio. But we see these ducks looking, again, rather realistic, and we see a silhouette which looks kind of rotoscoped. And if not, it's some pretty impressive animation there. And the ducks fly away, except for one. And Robert C. Bruce asks, why aren't you going? And the duck is like, nope. The duck is very proud and shows off an American flag.
Poor ducks. Fly, stupid, fly! You'll be shot! Why don't you fly away?
You would think that this would be a World War II joke, but you have to keep in mind that this came out in 1940 and America was not in the war. In fact, they were neutral, and there was some bickering in Congress as to whether they should be part of this fight or not, but at this point they were neutral. In fact, this short would have been made in late 39, early 1940 anyway, so they were even more neutral then because the war had just started over in Europe. But no, it's my understanding that around this time, because the US was neutral, they would have their American flags plastered on the side of the ships that they were transporting cargo and such to ensure that they don't get targeted when the ships were out at sea. So I believe that that's what this joke is referencing. If I'm wrong about that, definitely let me know in the comments, but that's how it comes across, because sure, it could be seen as one of those American pride type jokes, but Avery is usually deeper than that, and I think part of it had to do with the ships being marked as American so they don't get shot. I mean, why else would the duck just stand there? But for good measure, I like at the end that we hear a very sped up version of Yankee Doodle, because why not? Then we see a bit that didn't really do much for me, but hey, your mileage may vary. We hear that plenty of termites cause a lot of damage to trees over the years, and we see that instead of being a whole bunch of termites, it's just the one that seems to be very proud of himself, cutting down this tree on his own and pushing it down. So, regardless, that's one strong termite. Now, the next bit is so stupid, I love it. I mean, Tex Avery loved doing his dad jokes, and this is definitely one of the most dad joke of them all.
Listen to those rhythmic hoofbeats as he gallops across the plains.
I mean, look how happy the horse is. He's clearly proud of how rhythmic he is, isn't he? And I like how the cowboy's just sitting there, not even doing anything about his horse being clearly insane. And there's not a punchline to it either. It's just simply this horse being an idiot. But we are now at night. But as you expect, it starts off serious and gets kind of silly at the end. But look, you got the realistic looking wolf. You think it's going to be him howling at the moon, but no, he just screams out, "Hey Mabel, come on out."
Listen.
Hey, Mabel! Come on out!
And again, I couldn't really find what reference that would be relating to, so if you have an idea, definitely let me know. But I like how it ends with the Cody just panting, just waiting right there for Mabel, I guess, and we hear the tune, "If I Could Be With You," because, hey, Starling's got to do his puns, right? Again, we get a gag that's a bit of a build-up, so we just hear Robert C. Bruce just going on about how this camel can just go days and days and days without water, refreshing water, and the camel just bluntly says, in Mel Blanc's normal voice, "I don't care what you say, I'm thirsty."
He is noted for being able to go for weeks without water. Day after day, he plods over scorching desert sands in terrific heat, never once desiring a cool, refreshing drink of water.
I don't care what you say, I'm thirsty.
Avery had previously used this gag in cross-country detours where we saw a polar bear saying, "I don't care what you say, I'm cold."
Plus a thick coat of heavy fur to keep him good and warm.
I don't care what you say, I'm cold.
So yeah, Avery likes to reuse his gags, but it's interesting that he reused one so quick after, considering that cross-country detours came out the same year. And the last bit, of course, we're going to end on a wild dog acting wild instead of being from the wild. Of course, we got to go with that. But I love the animation here. In fact, I've seen it noted that it's possible that Virgil Ross did this scene, but don't quote me on that. Regardless, it is a great bit of animation, just this dog acting all, well, wild. In pretty much every freeze frame there, you can see all these really interesting facial expressions here. And Mel Blanc's delivery, any time he yells like this in a very impassioned way, just kills me. He goes, "What makes me wild? Look." And we end on yet another dogs with trees gag. Because of course we do, because Avery clearly has not done that before. But we end right there. Again, this is perhaps another mid-tier spot gag short. And if you're watching all these shorts in a row like I am, they can definitely get same old, same old. However, if you watch this amongst other shorts, perhaps, similar to the way that they arrange things on the Collector's Choice sets and that sort of thing, you might enjoy this a little bit better because it's surrounded by other types of shorts. And I really am trying to be fair to these spot gag shorts because they really weren't designed to be watched one after another, more or less what I've been doing of late. But Avery has definitely done better ones before, and he's done better ones since. But is it bad? No. For what it is, it's fine. I chuckled a lot. A couple of gags didn't quite meet its full potential, I suppose, but aside from that, if it's on, I'll definitely watch it. So, 7 out of 10, I think it's fine. Nothing too special, but definitely not terrible either, and quite fun. So that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
What makes me wild? What makes me wild? Look!